Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Neutrality Studies. And today I'm joined by György Varga, a Hungarian top diplomat who, among other positions, served as ambassador to the OSCE, where he was on the Russian side of the dispute before the war broke out before it became the full-scale war that we know it today. And I want to talk with him about this and about European politics. So, George, welcome.
Thank you for the invitation.
I'm really glad you said yes, because you've worked in this very sensitive area as a diplomat, and I've before had the pleasure of talking also to Benoit Paré, who was a OSCE observer, but he was there on the ground doing the recording of the exchanges of fire in various parts of Ukraine and on both sides of the front. You had a different position within the OSCE. Can you maybe explain that a little bit? How the OSCE came to be there and what your 4 years of service contained?
Yes, as we know, the OSCE is the main organization for the European security and cooperation, and the organization was named as the current one in Budapest in December 94, in the framework of the Budapest Summit. And in the case of the conflict in Ukraine, the OSCE set up two OSCE missions. One of these missions was working on the territory of Ukraine, the whole territory of Ukraine, and the other mission was set up in Russia along the Ukrainian-Russian state border, not controlled by the Ukrainian government after 2040. This mission in Russia, where I was the head of mission between 2017 and 2021, after a Swiss colleague. And this mission had the mandate to observe the situation at two border checkpoints, the crossing of the border by people, by vehicle, and this mission complied with this task, with this mandate from July 2014 till the last day of September 2021. We had more than 20 observers from different countries. The OSCE has 57 participating states, and the OSCE has as a tool in the toolbox the missions. During this period, the OSCE had 16 missions and offices in the participating states, mainly in the post-Soviet space and mainly in the post-Yugoslav countries.
So, and then when you started working there, like, was it simple? Was it an easy mandate? Like, were things orderly, or was there how was it?
You know, I think the work as the work of a professional was easy, because to be impartial, to be objective, to observe and to report what you see, I think it is a very easy task. Of course, the daily work at a border section in a period or in a regime of 24/7 without any break, it is a bit others. It means that my colleagues suffered a lot from the daily life by working at a state border not controlled by one of the side. And from Russia we received, I think, the help what we could expect. Russia was the host country. we had an office in a small city, not far from the border, and from this city we visited every day the border, and border observer teams remained at these border checking points and didn't leave these border checkpoints. And without any break, we complied with this mandate. And during this time, during more than 7 years, the mission observed about 25 million people crossing through these two border checkpoints, and about 250,000 trucks crossing these two border checkpoints, and about 80,000 buses during this period. It means that in the separatist region were living about 4 to 5 million people. This region was closed later from the 2017, isolated from the western side, from the western direction. It means by the Ukrainian forces, and this population could leave this region only in the direction of Russia.
Yeah.
Buy something, medicaments, to work, maybe to visit the relatives. It means the only direction for this population was the Russian one.
I mean, this is something that in the general, especially in the Western discussion, is often forgotten, right? That the separatist regions and the people who lived there have a very close relationship, actually, a natural relationship with Russia, and that actually the warfare probably increased that. We also tend to forget that a lot of the refugees, the Ukrainian refugees, actually went to Russia, right? So anyone who had a Ukrainian passport counts as a Ukrainian refugee if they had to leave. Hey, very brief intermission because I was recently banned from YouTube, and although I'm back, this can happen anytime again. So please consider subscribing not only here, but to my mailing list on Substack. That's pascalotta.substack.com. The link's going to be in the description below, and now back to the video. And how did you then experience the interconnection between like the separatist regions, these Donbas regions, and Russia back at the time when the idea, also on the Russian side, was still to keep the Donbas inside Ukraine? I mean, that, well, to me, to my mind, until 2021, that was not a disputed strategy, right? That was what was supposed to happen. The Minsk agreements were supposed to lead to a proper like reintegration of the Donbas into Ukraine. Or how did you perceive it?
Yes, of course, we were aware as observers working at the border that the Minsk agreements served as an instrument to reintegrate the Donbas region into the political, economic, and social life of Ukraine. And I think the first mistake was made already in 2015 in the implementation of the Minsk agreement, because Ukraine has an obligation, according to the Minsk II agreement, to change the constitution in favor of decentralization, a certain autonomy for the population of the separatist districts, Lugansk and Donetsk, to have special rights in this region. Ukraine should have changed the constitution. These changes didn't happen till now. And Russia, as a neighboring country, as a great power having millions of ethnic Russians in the direct neighborhood, and 10 millions of Russian speakers in Ukraine, this great power was very interested in the implementation of the Minsk agreement. And unfortunately, the two guarantors, France and Germany, according to my opinion, didn't do enough to force Ukraine to follow the points of the Minsk agreement. And among these points, I think the first one was the most important because it was a political signal already that time that Ukraine or different political forces in Ukraine didn't want to implement this Minsk agreement. And from 2020, we can find on the internet that the leadership, the Ukrainian leadership, refused almost officially the implementation of the Minsk agreement. And of course, it was, according to my view, one of the stimulation or motivation for the Russian side to launch later in February 2022 this military action.
You left your position in 2021, right? Before 4 or 5 months before the full-scale military operation then started, as the Russians call it. What was your view when you left? Did you expect that it would spiral into the war that it then became, or did the war, once it arrived, surprise you too?
You know, I had a feeling that time that this process is going to lead to such kind of political military situation. It means to a military operation can happen, and because we could identify some facts that time that this behind this process, this political process, it means the refusal of the implementation of the Minsk agreement by Ukraine. Behind this political process, we can identify other steps. During these years, between 2014 and 2022, Ukraine was prepared as a future NATO member. It means also a signal for Russia. And partially, Ukraine was prepared for a war. As we learned out from the declaration or interview given by Madame Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, and from President Hollande, the former French president. It means both guarantors confirmed that these Minsk agreements served a certain delay for Ukraine to be prepared for a war with Russia. And behind these reasons or motivations for the Russian side, we can identify another very important reason why the Russians were worried about. It was the minority rights. It means the new political elite coming to power in February 2040. This political elite abolished the main minority rights for the minorities in Ukraine. It was a case for the Polish, Hungarian, Romanian, Bulgarian minorities as well as minorities of EU member states. But the main issue was the abolishment of the minority rights for millions of ethnic Russians and 10 millions of Russian speakers. And the Minsk agreement could have resolved probably this issue for the Russian minority after the implementation and after the reintegration of the separatist districts into the social political life of Ukraine. Probably this minority rights issue could have been resolved. But without the implementation of the Minsk agreement, without a certain autonomy for these minorities, Russia could gather a lot of reasons why the situation cannot be prolonged. Because the NATO membership issue, the lack in the implementation of the Minsk agreement, the lack of minority rights for ethnic Russians and Russian speakers, the preparation of Ukraine for a war with Russia, and the preparation of Ukraine for a potential NATO membership. This amount of topics, I think it was the background for Russia to decide in favor of a military action.
Now, after that started, I mean, you as a Hungarian diplomat, and Hungary's position has from the beginning been actually a very neutral one, I would say, like trying to encourage the end of what was going on, while at the same time, of course, having a very important duties also toward the European Union, right, and solidarity. How do you evaluate this Hungarian position, which, in my view, I mean, Viktor Orban was the only European statesman who ever seriously tried to push for a diplomatic approach toward ending the fighting. What's your assessment?
You know, I am very proud of being Hungarian during this year, because the neutrality which you mentioned, I think it is the best option today, and it would have been the best option for the European Union, because the absolutization of the war in Ukraine, I think, has created this current chaos in the international relations. The chaos is the result of the bad answers of the collective West to the conflict in Ukraine from 2014, and the bad answers to the war from 2022. And I am very glad, and I don't represent the official position of the Hungarian government, and I can formulate my views independently. But as I said, I'm very proud that I can support fully the today's Hungarian position, because the only way to finalize this conflict, to end this war, the only way to end with the absolutization of the victim, and with the absolutization of the aggressor, and with this war, with the absolutization of this war. Because in the case of other wars, we cannot identify such kind of features, because demonizing the aggressor, we use not to demonize the United States in the case of a military action against Iran, against Venezuela, against Nigeria, against Syria, against Iraq, or in any other country. And we use not to dehumanize the aggressor in case of any conflicts, military actions, wars. And I think to stabilize Europe again, and to make Europe as the continent of the peace and freedom, and to renovate the content of the European Union, I think the only way is the Hungarian one. And we could see that Hungary was more neutral, and Turkey as well. And today Slovakia and the Czech Republic are following this direction. We were more neutral than the neutral Austria or Switzerland.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And it means politicians, governments can behave in a normal way by analyzing the situation and representing the national interest. Today, I am convinced that Switzerland or Austria, the population of these countries, are not interested in a war in Europe. But these countries are financing this war. These countries, as neutral countries, constitutionally, are violating every day their own constitution. And I think the Hungarian position and the policy of the Hungarian government in this field can be considered as a very positive example.
Can we talk about this? Because, you know, this is one of the core or the core issue of my channel and my research, right? But what you're just laying out just shows that there's such a huge gap between countries or just political communities having a neutrality policy, which goes hand in hand with having like neutrality pronouncements. I mean, maybe in the constitution or in the foreign policy papers on the one hand, and actually politics of neutrality when states try to somehow follow what we would intuitively recognize as neutral. So even NATO member states like Turkey and Hungary were able to play a more neutral role in the sense of engaging with both parties. And I must emphasize it's engagement with both sides and not seclusion from both. And they were able to do that because of the access that they had and because of the way that they approached their own foreign policy interests, whereas the Austria and Switzerland and Ireland too, to a good degree, you know, they used a paper neutrality that then, though, in the political realm, translated to more or less like 95% support to what one of the sides was doing. Can you maybe talk a little bit to that, how Hungary was able to play with both sides, despite being bound by treaty to one of the sides?
Yes, as I said, I cannot formulate this position as an insider in our government, but as I realized during these years, and I said I am very proud of this direction, I think the main issue within this policy making is to represent the national interest.
Mm-hmm.
And if the Hungarian government identified the national interest as or the war in versus the national interest, we cannot support the sanctions. I think the population of our countries is not interested in the today's absolutization of the war.
Mm-hmm.
Blackmailing through sanctions became the main phenomenon in the current international relations. Countries should comply with the rules of others. If you don't comply with the rules, you will be sanctioned as well by secondary sanctions. It means a group of countries in the world, this is the collective West, USA, the European Union, are sanctioning all countries in the world. All countries, because these sanctions are relevant for every country in the world. The transport corridors, the energy routes, the airspace, everything is blocked and paralyzed by sanctions. When Hungary became the member of the European Union, we believed and we expected Brussels to open up the foreign political, foreign economic, transport, banking, and other opportunities for the Hungarian economic actors to help them to reach out to the whole world. It means it was the advantage of the EU membership for Hungary and for other new EU member states, and we expected this behavior from Brussels. And today, our economic actors are facing a situation in which Brussels, the European Commission, is initiating every day new limitations, new sanctions for the economic actors of the 27 EU member states.
Right.
It means we have 19 sanction packages, and these sanctions are working as a straitjacket limiting the opportunities of the economic actors of the 27 EU member states.
Why does it work? Why does Hungary not just say like no? Because it needs unanimity, right? Hungary has in effect a veto. Every member state has a veto, but they're not able to do that. I mean, why is there such a wave that just drags everybody along, even when it's clearly against the national interest?
Yes, you are right. And as we can see, Hungary joined this sanction policy because Hungary wanted to be a loyal EU partner without blocking the majority of the EU member states to implement its foreign policy. And of course, during this process and in these years, we had a lot of decision points where Hungary needed to use the veto right. But again, a problem. The absolutization of the war means that we can face a moral degradation within the EU. If you are using your right to put a veto on a sanction package or a concrete step, some countries are saying that Hungary should leave the European Union. Hungary is blocking the European Union foreign policy. But nobody is saying in case of when the United States is using its veto right in the UN Security Council 20 times in a row, because this is the United States. And I hope that the process is going on when not only Hungary but also other countries are realizing that the best direction is to end this war and to finalize this process.
You know, I've had a very interesting email exchange recently with somebody who very convincingly argued, these sanctions are a way of claiming sovereignty, because it is a sovereign act, right? It's a foreign policy tool by the institution that governs a certain place. And we can see how the United States has been using these sanctions forever, for a long time. The EU for a long time didn't, then started, but didn't do secondary sanctions. It goes along with those, and used sanctions only on the outside. And now it's starting to use sanctions on the inside, even against individuals, which is a kind of the ultimate way in which a sovereign designates foe and friend, on the outside and on the inside, and that this again is like part of this silent sovereignty grab from the lower level, because of course the EU is not a nation state, the Hungary is, but we are in this weird process where the Brussels center is taking away more and more of the sovereign rights. How do you see that, and what do you think? The European member states, are they going to let it happen that more and more of this sovereignty goes to the EU without ever, without this being ever properly done through a referendum, or properly done through even discussions, when just like little by little it just starts going up to the higher level?
I think we can see some efforts from the side of some European regional powers being interested in concentrating the decision-making process in Brussels, and to take away some opportunities from the national level, from the member states. And they are using the opportunity of the Ukrainian war, because through the absolutization of this war, they can refer to the need that we should centralize our decision-making process. We should avoid using the veto right, because the European Union can answer the new challenges only in a compact way. It means we had a lot of slogans how the European bureaucracy today is working against the sovereignty of the member states. And as I said, absolutization of the war. Yes, and according to my opinion, we should not think always in the framework of absolutizing different wars, conflicts, because we are facing everyday conflicts. The Greenland issue was coming, the Venezuela issue was coming, other conflicts. This is the history of the mankind, and only a part of these politicians, a big group of European politicians would like to use, according to me, they would like to misuse the today's war in Ukraine to centralize the European Union and to make the European Union as a United States of Europe or something. And I think these concepts are fighting against each other. I am supporter of the sovereign one.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people in Europe are, on the one hand, conscious that Europe needs to live together, so there need to be some form of structure. On the other hand, Hungarians like to be Hungarians, and Swiss like to be Swiss, and we understand that there's a difference. But so there's this tension has always been there. But the also, on the other hand, the process of trying to push everyone into the same direction, which you can see is of course the best for the top dog that tells everybody where to go. And this top dog for the longest time used to be the United States. Now for the first time, the top dog is kind of looking at the smaller ones and is saying like, hey, can I have that piece? Or I'm going to help myself to that piece. How do you think that the Greenland issue, or let me rephrase it, the United States did a lot of things that are so obviously against the international law and the rules that, especially the Europeans try to profess with, like, sovereignty. I mean, the invasion of Venezuela, the war against the 12-day war against Iran, the what's happening. I mean, the genocide in Gaza, the way that Iraq was invaded, the actions in Syria, the Golan Heights, and so on. There's so many examples of things that were clearly contrary to international law and that the EU went somehow along with. But now it's going to be about their plot of land. How do you think this is now impacting them? We're also looking at Davos at the moment.
Yes. I think that the Trump administration, with the Trump administration, the political realism returned to the international politics. And it was not a surprise for me, because under the Biden administration, we realized a liberal approach to the international relations, with national interest of the United States, but covering with moral reasons and with a value-based approach. Today, the EU administration, the Trump administration, is using a more direct approach based on the political realism. And for me, it is not a surprise. My starting point in assessing the foreign policy of the American administration is always the starting point, the war in Ukraine. And from the point of view of the war in Ukraine, according to my opinion, the Trump administration is playing a positive role, because already in the campaign in 2024, and also after came to power, the president confirmed he wanted to end this war. Marco Rubio, the state secretary, said on the 6th of March last year that this war in Ukraine is a proxy war between the United States and Russia. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was a very, very important turning point, because it was very important to recognize the basis of this war. And after the declaration of this proxy war by the EU administration, I calmed down, because I believed that we will experience a new phase, and we will achieve in a quick way to end the war in Ukraine. It didn't happen, and unfortunately, it didn't happen due to the behavior of the European elite opposing the policy of the new US president in ending the war. And as we realized on the 2nd of March, if I remember correctly, on 2nd of March, it means 6 weeks after President Trump came to power, the coalition of willing was set up in London. And during this year, we can see the hesitation of the US-American administration in ending the war or in supporting the war, because the USA has a double role in the war in Ukraine. The USA is a participant in a proxy war, as recognized Marco Rubio, and the USA is trying to be a mediator between Ukraine and Russia. And this double role, I think it is a very difficult task.
So do you perceive it as an actual double role, or do you think of it as a double role? Because other people are saying it's just a farce, right? It's a cloak over reality, and the reality was admitted by Mr. Rubio. It's a proxy war, so if the war is still going on 1 year later, the logical conclusion is to say, like, no, the current U.S. administration is still willing to fight a proxy war. I mean, in a sense, they're not willing to give up, um, because for probably for leverage, right? You continue the war, the warfare, because you haven't reached a mutual agreement on what would be a proper settlement for both sides. So you continue diplomacy by other means, right? As Mr. Clausewitz taught us. But if you interpret it as a problem of double role, it's like, okay, on the one hand we have people who do still want to fight the proxy war. On the other hand, we have people like Mr. Trump who, I mean, let's be benign and say, like, he actually wants to end it. And how do you think this is working?
As I said, I assess the situation from the point of view of the war in Ukraine. And the new national security strategy of the USA, signed 2 months ago, again, it is a positive step for me by confirming the Monroe Principle. I cannot say that this Monroe Principle is an optimal tool for every country, but from the point of view of ending the Ukrainian war, this is a hope that if the United States considers the Western Hemisphere as an exclusive field of interest, space of interest for the United States, in this case, the United States should respect the legitimate security interest of other great powers. We cannot expect Russia or China to respect the Monroe Doctrine on the Western Hemisphere without having the right to follow legitimate security interest in the direct neighborhood. It means this is a very big contradiction. We can identify legitimate interest of the United States on Cuba, but we cannot identify legitimate security interest of Russia in the neighboring Ukraine. This is a very big contradiction, and based already on our experiences in the missile crisis on Cuba, 1962. The Russian or the Soviet leader Khrushchev and Fidel Castro made a very sane decision to de-escalate the situation.
Yeah. So when you're saying this gives you hope, then you mean the hope of not of a fair world, because obviously Monroe Doctrine isn't fair, but the hope of not having a war among the superpowers, a nuclear war that will annihilate us all. I mean, that kind of you're hoping for that kind of realism, that there needs to be a balance in order to not have an all-consuming third world war.
Yes, I think the basis of this current chaos should be eliminated. And if the United States counts on the respect from the side of other great powers on the Western Hemisphere, we cannot stabilize the world without providing some rights to other great powers as well. Because the basis of the today's chaos is that there are no rules. The United States has the right to consider the whole Western Hemisphere as its own, but The Russian Federation cannot defend the members of the Russian ethnic minority in Ukraine. And if you remember, we can compare the situation in Kosovo and the situation in Ukraine from the point of view of defending the rights of national minorities. The United States from another continent came to bomb the Serbs in the name on behalf of defending the rights of the national minorities or national minority in Kosovo. But in the case of Ukraine and Russia, we refuse the legitimate reason or rights of the Russian Federation to do anything. And again, this is the moral degradation of the collective West in a certain way, because I cannot understand why the European Union has been interested in tolerating the discrimination of the national minorities in Ukraine. And as a Hungarian, I have experiences from our Hungarian minority group in Ukraine. And every minority group suffered a lot in Ukraine after 2014. And Ukraine, as an associate member of the European Union and the future member of the European Union, as we can hear every day, I cannot understand the European politicians why they didn't force Ukraine to provide the national minorities with the necessary rights, because it is a security factor as well. And I cannot understand the experts of the Council of Europe or the OSCE, experts in the field of national minorities, NATO, European Union, because an expert of the security policy can consider as a very dangerous security factor if millions of an ethnic group or speakers of different languages, this group can be considered as a security challenge. Because in the case of Ukraine, the neighboring country is the permanent member of the UN Security Council, is a nuclear power, is a great power. And this state will not tolerate the lack of the minority rights in the direct neighborhood, because the USA didn't tolerate the lack of minority rights on the other continent in case of Serbia.
Yeah, I mean, this is the sad point where, the acceptance of minority rights or the rejection of minority rights usually has something to do with the direct interest of the superpower, of the great power involved. And this is where all of the accusations of hypocrisy, of course, are stemming from. But Ambassador Varga, this was very, very interesting. I thank you for all of these testimonies and your analysis. People who want to read more from you, is there a place where you regularly or sometimes publish?
I try to be very passive. Sometimes where I become nervous, I write, and I follow invitation, but I try to be very passive.
Okay. That means everybody, if you start reading a lot of articles from Ambassador Varga, you know that we're going toward nervous times.
I have some articles in German.
Okay.
Germany, in Switzerland appeared my articles, and also in Hungary we have regional, national media outlets where I have my publication. But as I said, I am not interested in a very high level activity.
In that case, I'll just invite you back here, maybe also with a couple of other colleagues from the diplomatic service. It's always a pleasure to talk to diplomats.
Of course, I will not refuse.
Thank you. We will have you back here, Ambassador György Varga. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for the invitation again.